morning, Lancer Media. My name is Hannah Moore, and today I'm here to talk with our newly elected student member of the Board of Education of Frederick County for the 2025 to 2026 school year, Alex Thomas. Thomas was elected into his position on February 19th after a long campaign against 4 other FCPS students. Though his term does not technically start until the summer, it's important for us to get to know our SMOB so we know who is representing us on the board as students. Today we're here to discuss how his running experience was, what makes him qualified, the plans that he has, the issues that he wants to represent. So let's get started.
Now, before we start talking about what SMOB does, I think it's really important, especially nowadays, to get to know the person behind the position. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Alex?
Yeah, so I'm Alex. I'm a junior at Linganore High School. When I actually have the position, I'll be a senior. But just a little bit about myself. I've been doing student government for a really long time. I'm involved in a lot of clubs. I do a lot at my church, and I do a lot in Boy Scouts too. I'm hoping to become an Eagle Scout next year.
That's awesome. So for those who don't know, what does the student member of the board even do?
So the board, just to overall, like the Board of Education, they manage everything that goes on in our schools. They manage what the curriculum is, what school lunch contracts we have, like staffing, all of that big stuff, everything that students care about, especially dress code and all those fun things. So what the student member of the board does is they represent the student's perspective on all those issues. So if students have issues with temperature in their classrooms, if they have issues with dress code, if they have issues with any of these things, it's the student member of the board's job to relay that back to the Board of Education, to make sure that students are represented on these big issues.
So there's a lot of responsibility involved in that position. So what prompted you or inspired you to run?
Yeah, so last year I ran for this position and I did not win. But I decided to run again this year and I did win. But a lot of that had to do with students talking to me about student member of the board over the summer, asking me, are you going to run again? And also just memories from when I ran last year. I was talking to students, talking to teachers, them feeling comfortable talking to me about these big issues. I think that really did have a big impact on me, and I think it really did impact me deciding to run again this year.
So I'm sure it can be a little disheartening when you don't win, but how does it feel that you won this year and now you get to be SMOB?
I think it's an incredible opportunity. I'm so excited for all the things that I get to do, not only this year, not in the position, but next year in the position too. Because I've already had so many opportunities presented to me when I'm not even in the job yet. And I think just one of the best things, honestly, about winning this position has just been hearing back from old teachers that I've had saying congratulations. A lot of my elementary school teachers who knew about me and knew I was passionate about government, even in elementary school, they contacted me and said congratulations. And I think for me, that was the biggest win, not even just winning this election, but getting to hear back from all those old friends.
Yeah, it's really great to hear from old teachers and old friends. I know me, I've literally just emailed my teachers about dumb little things just because I wanted them to know.
Yeah, of course.
So with such a big thing, I bet that feels really great.
Yeah.
And when you were answering that question, you mentioned about opportunities that you were getting. So I know one of the opportunities that you're getting is to shadow under our current SMOB, Elijah Steele. So what do you hope to learn or take away from that experience?
One of the biggest things I hope to take away is kind of to better understand the challenges that a SMOB gets. And not just from students, but specifically from faculty and from working with the central office in downtown Frederick. Because I know that a lot of student member of the boards, they want to do things, they want to visit schools, they want to put stuff on social media, but they often get bashlack or they get restricted by people working in the central office. And so one of the biggest things that I hope I can get a better understanding of and kind of get a head start on is kind of working around those things. It's kind of understanding what I need to do to visit schools, to post on social media, to get control of the job so that I can start on day one.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of students that they don't really see their SMOBs at their schools or hear them representing their voices. So what is it about you that's going to set you apart from those past SMOBs?
You know, I hate to say it, but I've definitely heard that too. I visited 11 schools over my campaign, and when I visited a lot of those schools, oftentimes I always ask this when I visit the schools. I was like, do you know the current name of our current SMOB? And none of them could answer that question. Only a few raised their hands, if that. And I think it was so disheartening when I was campaigning, going to these schools, and the advisors would talk to me and they would say, you're the first SMOB anything to visit our school. And I think that what's going to set me apart, what's going to get those students who have never seen a SMOB before, is going to visit their schools. That's why I said I want to work on understanding the SMOB position itself, because I want to start on day one. I want to start visiting schools, not in the fourth term, but on day one, working that first week, planning those meetings with SGA advisors so that students get to see me out and about so that they can talk to me about these big issues. Because the way the SMOB becomes old-fashioned, the way the SMOB gets out of place is that they don't put themselves out there and they don't get involved in the community. And I think that's what will set me apart, is because of how much I want to connect with students and get out there.
Like within connecting to those students, how do you feel that your past and current leadership positions are going to prepare you for that?
I think the biggest thing that has prepared me for this is the fact that I've ran twice. I think me going to all these different schools over these past 2 years, me talking with so many students about these incredibly hard issues, I think that has really prepared me to talk on a big stage, especially to adults who look down on students for talking on these issues. But I also think that when all my previous experience working in middle school as an SGA president, working in high school as an SGA president, I think all of those things, they've really prepared me on working with adults, asking those hard questions, planning projects and all that, which is going to be incredibly important at SMOB.
Yeah, and like working with adults, there's a lot of important issues that are going to face you on the board. So one of those is the budget, which everyone has talked about. We know we have a lot of issues in FCPS with our budget and budget cuts for the school year, and like that results in losing teachers, cutting art programs. What can you tell us about that and your plans for it?
Yeah, so the budget, of course, is a huge issue. It's always been an issue in education, but it's just really been pushing the envelope these past few years, just because of the physical strains that Frederick has seen from the state. And the reason we've had those is because the state passed this legislation in 2018. It's called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And it was this huge, elaborate piece of legislation that really wanted to make Maryland one of the best states in the country for education. And the way they wanted to do that was by hiring more teachers, by improving curriculum, and making sure that students had access to jobs and those mentorships so that they can go into the real world with experience. But a lot of that, of course, costs money. And the way that we attract teachers is by increasing teacher salaries. And so by 2026, the minimum teacher salary that can be allowed legally in Maryland is going to be $60,000 a year. So what that means is that FCPS, in order to meet that mandate by 2026, has been increasing teacher salaries by about 5 to 7% every year, which is extremely expensive and straining on our budget. Which, of course, I think teachers should be paid more. This is a great thing that's happening. It's just happening so fast that it's putting a strain on the resources we have. And especially nowadays with inflation and all these issues that our country and the world are dealing with, it's putting extra strain on top of that. So, of course, all these programs we saw last year, we saw it in band, we saw it in art programs, we saw it in girls flag football, all these different things where funding was targeted or looked at, especially in sport fees where fees were raised so that FCPS could make more money to kind of close that gap. I think the budget next year, when I'm dealing with the budget and working with the board on that, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get those things that students want across to them, that these things should happen, because we were all looking at all these big ticket items. And so when students say we want this or this, we have to make sure that those are also included and we're also focusing on them so that the board also sees them as a big priority.
Yeah, the budget is going to be a really tricky situation, but I know we can count on you to represent our voices. And also within like representing voices, there's more to it than just the budget. There have been a lot of controversial decisions among the board, such as their stance on Policy 443. Can you explain what that is for people who don't know and what exactly it means for students?
So yeah, of course, Policy 443 is a very controversial thing that has definitely come up lately. But this policy has been put in place for almost a decade now. And what it really does is it protects trans kids from stuff that's maybe going on at home or from bullying and all that stuff that goes on in schools. And so what it specifically does is that if a student identifies differently than the gender they were assigned at birth, if they go by a different name, if they use makeup or dress differently at school than they do at home, then those teachers, those administrators don't have to report that back home. And a lot of people, you may even be thinking, well, doesn't that encroach on parents' rights? Shouldn't parents have the right to know these things about their kids? And I think there is a valid argument in that. But at the same time, if these kids did not tell their parents about these things, if these kids are not comfortable telling their parents these things, there's a reason behind that. And I think for a lot of kids who are going through this stuff, if, transitioning and all of that, I think it's very difficult for them. And sometimes home is not a very safe place for them to be. So just to really sum it up, I mean, this policy really does just protect those kids whose home is just not a safe place to be, or if parents aren't always that accepting. But it also, it helps incorporate trans students who participate in sports, making sure that they participate in the sport that they identify with their gender. And this really doesn't tie into what I was just previously talking about at home, because of course if a student is participating in a sport of a gender that they identify as, the parent is obviously going to know about that. And in FCPS, there's been no reported incidents of anything bad happening with these trans students. So I don't really get the argument that some Board of Ed members are having that we need to be protecting girls and in some cases boys, because there has been no reported incidents, and these are simply just students who want to do what they want to do. They want to do what they identify as, and we as human beings have the right to do that. And so when I'm on the Board of Education, when I'm fighting for these students, even though it's a small percentage, it's of course my responsibility to still represent them to my fullest.
And speaking of a small percentage of students, we have 47,000 students in our county, and how are you going to make sure that you represent all of these voices fairly?
So one of the biggest things that I've struggled to understand, especially with previous mobs, is I just don't understand how they could have understood students' perspectives on all these topics without going to these schools. I mean, when I've been to 11 schools, which is more than some SMOBs will ever visit, and I learned about so many topics that I just never knew were issues before, and I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for me to reach all of those students, but it's definitely going to be my biggest priority to do that, because I need to understand all these big issues. I can't say I know the perspective of students at Walkersville High School because I haven't even visited there yet. So I think as student member of the board, it's your biggest priority as the representative you're the only representative of students. So you have to really take on that key responsibility of visiting schools, reaching out to as many students as you can. So that's definitely going to be my biggest priority, Hannah.
Wait, that's all the questions that I have for you today, Alex. Is there anything else you want to let the listeners know?
Yeah, of course. So when I get put into office on July 1st, the biggest thing that I want you to do, high schoolers, is to follow the SMOB Instagram account. You can follow my campaign one that I have out right now, but I really want you to follow the official SMOB account so that you get these updates, so that I can connect with you and you can get a better understanding of what's going on in the county. That's the biggest thing that you can do for your future right now.
And if you guys want to follow that account, the Instagram is FCPS_SMOB. All right, thank you so much for your time, Alex. We know you're going to do great things in office.
Thank you, Hannah.